I sat in the back seat, purse in my lap, as they laughed inside the restaurant. The car windows fogged slowly, trapping the heat and something quieter. Grief, maybe. They'd said it was crowded. Said I'd be more comfortable out here. 93 minutes passed before they came back with a lemon tart and a smile like nothing had happened. That's when I knew. I wasn't family anymore. I was a favor. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Evelyn Markham smoothed the hem of her cardigan, brushing away a barely visible thread. The slacks were the same navy pair she wore to doctor's appointments, clean, pressed, no wrinkles at the knees. A light lemon-scented lotion lingered on her hands. She didn't wear perfume anymore. Cassie said it was too much in close spaces. Evelyn had remembered that. She always remembered. She sat on the edge of the floral love seat by the door, hands folded neatly over her purse. The clock ticked slow and deliberate. 11:42. Her phone buzzed. Cassie. We're out front. No knock, no call, just text. Evelyn stood, picked up her cane, more for appearances than necessity, and locked the door behind her. The sun hit hard across the lawn. September heat in Savannah always overstayed its welcome. She waved, unsure if they saw her. The silver Lexus idled at the curb, windows rolled up, AC likely blasting. Cassie didn't get out. Neither did Greg. Evelyn opened the back door and eased in. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. Cassie glanced in the rear view, her oversized sunglasses hiding most of her face. "You're wearing that." Evelyn blinked. "Yes." Greg chuckled under his breath. "Didn't think we were doing a Sunday school reunion." Cassie twisted in her seat. "It's just, the place has a vibe. Greg's clients are meeting us there. Maybe next time, just something." "Sleeker?" Evelyn offered a soft smile. "This is clean. I ironed it this morning." Cassie was already facing forward again. "Right?" The ride to the restaurant was short, but Evelyn felt every second. She watched streets she'd known for 50 years pass by like unfamiliar faces. They pulled into the shaded side of a restored brick building, French bistro, if she remembered right. Expensive, linen napkins, tiny portions, no prices on the menu. Greg turned in his seat. "Hey, quick thing. We're gonna run in and catch up with folks. It's a little packed and..." Cassie filled the silence. "And you probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway, Mom. It's loud in there, tiny tables." Evelyn tilted her head, confusion trying not to surface. "Oh, I thought we were eating together." "You are," Cassie said brightly, already unbuckling. "Just after. We'll be quick." Greg nodded. "And the AC in the car's blasting. More comfortable than inside. Trust me." They were gone before Evelyn could finish her nod. She sat there, purse on her lap, seatbelt still across her chest. The car had cooled during the ride, but it didn't last. Sunlight slanted across the dashboard, heating the plastic until it shimmered. After a while, she unbuckled, shifted in her seat, and rolled the window down a crack. She reached into her purse and pulled out the water bottle Nina had given her 2 days ago. "Just keep it with you, Grandma," she'd said. "People underestimate heat." The cap clicked open. The water was warm, but it wet her mouth. Minutes passed. Evelyn turned on the radio. Static. Turned it off. Checked the dashboard clock. No messages. No calls. She traced the stitching in her purse with her finger, took off her cardigan, folded it beside her. A bead of sweat slid from her hairline down her temple. Her phone battery dropped to 17%. Still, no texts. A group of tourists passed by on the sidewalk, laughing, sun hats bobbing. A couple walked a golden retriever. Someone jogged by with earbuds in. Evelyn watched them all. Watched them live, checked the time again. 1 hour, the heat pressed in like a damp towel, heavy and clinging. Her breathing slowed, not panicked, just contained, managed. The restaurant door finally opened. Cassie and Greg stepped out, laughing. Greg wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, tossing it in a bin near the door. Cassie held a to-go cup with a straw. They walked to the car, radiant and unhurried. Cassie slid into the front seat, snapping her seatbelt like nothing had happened. See? That wasn't so long. Greg handed Evelyn a small bag. Got you a lemon tart. They were out of the salmon. Evelyn looked down at the pastry in the bag. No utensils. She smiled and said, "Thank you." Then she reached, very slowly, for the handle of her journal in her purse. The lemon tart sat untouched on Evelyn's counter, the bag folded neatly beside it. She'd taken it out of the car with the rest of her things, set it down by the fruit bowl, and never looked at it again. By the time evening settled over Savannah, long shadows slicing across her living room rug, Evelyn had made a pot of peppermint tea, opened the window to let in some of the cooler air, and returned to her armchair. Her journal lay on the side table, closed for now. She wasn't ready to see her own handwriting yet. The phone rang. Nina. Evelyn smiled gently as she picked it up. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Grandma. Did you guys have a nice lunch?" There was something in Nina's voice, soft, cautious, like she already knew. Evelyn kept her tone even. "Oh, we didn't really eat together. They had clients, I think. They went inside." Silence. Evelyn kept going. "It's fine. I waited in the car. The weather was a bit warm, but I had your water bottle with me. So thoughtful of you, by the way." Still, Nina didn't speak. Evelyn added, "They brought me back a tart." Then finally, "You were in the car the whole time?" Evelyn hesitated. "They were just busy." Nina's breath caught, barely audible. "Grandma, I don't think this is right anymore." That landed deeper than Evelyn expected. Her fingers traced the grain of the phone cord, as if it might ground her. She glanced toward the side table, then reached for her journal. With the phone still to her ear, she opened to the first blank page and wrote in slow, deliberate strokes. April 19th, lunch invitation, locked car. 93 minutes. She didn't say those words aloud, just let the pen do what her mouth wouldn't. Nina finally spoke again. "Do you want me to come over?" "No, darling," Evelyn said. "You've got class in the morning." Another pause. "I just don't like how they treat you, that's all." Evelyn smiled, even though no one could see it. "I know, I do." They said their goodnights. Evelyn set the phone down and closed the journal. It made a soft thunk, satisfying in its finality. She was still seated there 20 minutes later when the doorbell rang. She checked the peephole. Janine. Evelyn opened the door. "Afternoon tea?" Janine held up a paper bag and a raised eyebrow. "With lemon scones. I made them before I even knew you needed them." "Psychic as ever," Evelyn said, stepping aside. Janine breezed in, already scanning the room with that accountant's eye of hers. She noticed the tart on the counter, but said nothing. They sat in the sunlit nook beside the kitchen, where Evelyn kept her ceramic teapot and 2 mismatched cups, the same set they'd used for decades. Janine poured. "You look tense in the jaw. Something happen?" Evelyn hesitated. Then, "They picked me up today for lunch. Cassie and Greg." Janine waited. Evelyn took a breath. "We drove to that French place near Whitaker Square. When we got there, they told me to wait in the car, said Greg had clients inside." Janine's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened slightly around the cup. Evelyn continued. "I waited. An hour and a half, give or take. They brought me a dessert on the way out. That was the lunch." Janine leaned back. "You're being erased." The words were simple, cold, accurate. Evelyn stared into her tea. Quietly, too, Janine leaned forward, elbows on the table now. "So what are you going to do?" There was no tremble in Evelyn's voice when she answered. "Erase them back, on paper." Janine blinked. "That's a sharp pen you're about to pick up." Evelyn reached under her chair and pulled the journal back into her lap. "They think silence is agreement. They think I'm still grateful. And you're not. I'm documenting." Janine gave a short nod. "You're going to need help, legal help." "I'm not touching a cent," Evelyn said. "Not yet. I'm just organizing the truth." Janine reached into her purse, pulled out a notebook, and began jotting something down. "What are you doing?" Evelyn asked. Helping, Janine said. If we're going to do this, Evelyn, we're going to do it in ink and duplicates. The sun had barely cleared the oaks when Evelyn pulled the step stool into the hallway closet. It scraped lightly across the floorboards as she steadied herself. Her fingers grazed the storage bin she hadn't touched in years, labeled in her own tidy script, documents, personal. Inside, pressed between a yellowed copy of her mortgage and Nina's kindergarten report card, was the folder. Blue, slim, clipped tight. She brought it to the dining table and laid it flat. She didn't open it right away, just looked at it, hands folded like she was waiting for someone to arrive. Then, with the same calm she used while grading essays long ago, she flipped it open. Her own signature stared back at her. 7 years ago, sharp and confident. She recognized the formatting, courtesy of a budget estate planner Greg had recommended back when things still passed as civil. Her eyes dropped to the distribution line. Cassie Wilburn, 60% Nina Wilburn, 40% Evelyn sat back. No reaction crossed her face, but she let the numbers settle in like dust. 60%. It wasn't the money, it was the assumption that she'd been invisible long enough to be predictable. She reached for a mechanical pencil from the drawer, clicked the lead into place, and began circling words, then underlining, then crossing out. She removed the rusting paperclip and added a clean page. At the top she wrote, "This revision is not based on love. It is based on evidence." Her pen paused. Then, as if memory guided her hand, she added the date again. April 19th. Outside, a soft knock tapped against the screen door. Nina. Evelyn stood slowly, careful with her hips, and opened the door. Nina stood there holding a small canvas tote with cartoon peaches printed along the side. "Just a few things," Nina said. "Figured you might need backups." Evelyn took the bag. Inside, a cold water bottle, packets of almonds, ginger chews, a miniature battery-powered fan still in the plastic, and a handwritten note on a yellow sticky. "Stay hydrated. Stay cool. You matter." Nina offered an awkward smile. "Just in case." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she held the expression still. She nodded once. "You're a good girl." Nina leaned in and hugged her, brief and soft, then disappeared down the steps. Evelyn closed the door and locked it. She walked back to the folder, set the care bag gently beside it, and removed the sticky note from the fan. She pressed it into the inside cover of the trust folder, just above her own handwriting. She filed the moment, quietly, beside the parking lot. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang again. This time, Evelyn opened it to find Janine standing beside a short man in a perfectly pressed tan suit. His tie was navy with small white anchors. His briefcase was leather, monogrammed, and clearly well cared for. "Victor Tran," he said, extending a hand. "Janine says you're making changes." "I am," Evelyn replied. "Good," he said. "We make them permanent." They entered the living room. Victor surveyed the space, not rudely, but like someone trained to notice what others ignored. His eyes flicked over framed photos, titles on the bookshelf, a stack of unopened mail. Janine took the floral armchair. Victor remained standing, already pulling out a slim legal pad. Evelyn returned to the table and turned the blue folder toward him. Victor opened it, scanned the contents, and nodded once. "You annotated in pencil. Smart." "Nothing permanent until it deserves to be," Evelyn said. Victor looked up at her, intrigued. "You have good instincts." She pointed to the page she'd added. "This will be a different kind of legacy." He glanced at the note she'd included. "Based on evidence," he read aloud. "That's language I can work with." Janine sipped her tea. "We're not rewriting a fairy tale here. We're closing the book." Victor made a few notes. "Do you want them to know right away?" "No," Evelyn said. "Not yet." "Do you want them to contest it?" "No," she said again. "I want them to try." "And fail." Victor Tran adjusted his glasses as Evelyn placed a small stack of documents between them on the dining table. There was a precision to the way she did it, measured, almost clinical, like she was presenting a final exam, not a life's worth of legal intentions. Victor scanned the top page first, her original will, annotated in graphite. Below that, a printed screenshot of a text from Cassie. We're out front. And just beneath it, Evelyn's journal entry, copied in clean cursive on loose-leaf paper. No date missing, no emotion wasted. Victor didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, without looking up, he said, "We'll scrap the will." Evelyn arched an eyebrow. "Scrap? We go irrevocable. Trust, not will. No probate, no loopholes, no court delays. Once we seal it, it locks." Janine sat back with a satisfied little hum. "Good." Victor finally looked up. "If you want to make this unshakable, we add a no contest clause. And we do a capacity verification with your physician. Today, if possible." Evelyn nodded. "I'm due for a checkup next week. I'll move it up." Victor continued scribbling notes. "Assets?" Evelyn answered crisply. "The house, 3 CDs at Southern Atlantic Bank, a savings account, and a few small investments. I have account numbers and balances ready. I didn't want to waste your time." Victor offered a brief smile. "You're not." Janine sipped her tea and leaned forward. "Can you structure it so that Nina controls nothing outright until she's a little older, but Cassie and Greg never touch a dime?" "Absolutely," Victor said. "We set up a trustee structure. Janine, are you willing to co-manage?" "I'd be insulted if I weren't," Janine said. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. "Nina gets everything," Victor nodded. "Understood. No delays, no negotiations, no backdoor second chances," Evelyn added. "They get nothing." Victor paused his note-taking. "You're certain?" She looked out the window where the magnolia tree swayed just slightly in the breeze. "They left me in a locked car in the sun, Victor. On purpose. I'm not angry, I'm resolved." Victor set down his pen. "Then we draft everything this week. I'll bring a notary. We'll need to retitle the house and accounts into the trust, and I'll coordinate with the bank." Janine tapped her nails once against the table. "Include long-term directives. Healthcare, burial rights, power of attorney." Victor nodded. "All part of the package." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can we leave a letter in the trust?" Victor looked up. "Yes. One that explains why." His tone shifted. Warmer now, less clinical. "Absolutely. That can be part of the file. Sealed, but accessible to Nina. It can also be structured as a final statement if they try to dispute your intentions." Evelyn looked down at her journal again. "They'll call it dramatic." Janine snorted. "Let them call it whatever they want. They'll still be calling it from outside the fence." Victor smiled slightly. "You'd be surprised how many cases turn once we include motive. And this..." He tapped the notes. "This is pure motive. Documented. Provable." The room fell quiet. Just the sound of the ceiling fan humming gently overhead. Evelyn's voice was quieter now. "I want Nina to know this isn't about punishing them." Victor met her gaze. "Then say that." Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. Victor began repacking his notes. "I'll bring a draft by Thursday. In the meantime, don't discuss this with anyone else. Not yet." Evelyn stood and walked him to the door. "Thank you, Victor." "You're the kind of client I built my practice for," he said. Once he was gone, Evelyn turned to Janine. "Do you think I'm going too far?" Janine looked her square in the eye. "No, I think you're finally going far enough." By the end of the week, Savannah's skies had turned overcast, the kind of soft gray that wrapped the city in a blanket of quiet. Inside Evelyn's living room, though, the air was anything but still. Victor laid out the documents on the dining table, each page clipped neatly and labeled. His notary sat silently at the edge of the room, flipping through her state-issued binder, eyes never wandering. Evelyn wore the same cardigan from the parking lot lunch, not out of sentiment but as a reminder, clean, ironed, intact. Victor tapped the top page with his pen. "You'll initial here, here, and here, then sign in full." Evelyn adjusted her reading glasses and took the pen. Her signature didn't shake. Not once. When she finished, the notary slid the document toward herself and stamped it. The thick sound of the seal echoed in the room, louder than anyone expected. Trust is now active, Victor said. Irrevocable as of today. Janine smiled without warmth. They won't know what hit them. Victor handed Evelyn a manila envelope. Inside were her own capacity documents, fresh from her primary care doctor. Clean bill of cognitive health, time-stamped, notarized, and signed. No one can claim you weren't thinking clearly, Victor said, even if they try. Evelyn nodded. I want to include something else. She opened her journal, flipped to the page she'd been shaping all week, and handed it over. The writing was tight, calm, and precise. They left me in the heat. I left them in the cold. Victor read it once, then again. This will be included in the sealed trust packet. Accessible only by Nina or a court order. And if they challenge it, they'll only draw more attention to their own behavior. With the trust now legally active, they moved to the next phase. Over the following days, Evelyn and Victor retitled everything. The deed to the house, once jointly held in the vague hope Cassie would someday help manage it, was now fully within the trust. Her CDs and savings accounts were transferred, asset by asset, into their new legal container. Everything Cassie thought she'd inherit had disappeared, quietly, legally, and irreversibly. The final task came last. Evelyn changed the locks. She stood outside her front door as the locksmith drilled out the old brass cylinder. The pop of the lock giving way felt louder than it should have, a clean break. She took the new keys and dropped one into a plain white envelope addressed in her neat block handwriting. Nina inside the house, she sat at the kitchen table and waited. At 6:42 p.m., her phone rang. Cassie. Evelyn let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then picked up. Hi, Mom, Cassie said, voice pitched higher than usual. We've been talking and Greg and I are a little concerned. Evelyn said nothing. You've been making decisions, Cassie continued. And you haven't been including us. Evelyn still didn't speak. Cassie exhaled sharply. We're just worried about your memory. You've always been so organized. But lately you're not answering texts, and you seem, I don't know, withdrawn. Evelyn looked across the table at the trust binder sitting next to a steaming cup of mint tea. I'm fine, Cassie. A pause. Are you sure? I have paperwork to prove it. More silence. Well, we just want what's best for you, Cassie said. Maybe a little support. We were thinking you might want to talk to someone neutral. Evelyn smiled. That won't be necessary, Cassie's voice shifted. Warmer, but not sincere. We could help sort out your accounts. Just simplify things. They're already simple. Cassie's cheer cracked. I don't want you making big decisions out of emotion. Oh, I'm not, Evelyn said. I'm making them out of memory. She ended the call before Cassie could reply. That evening, Nina arrived. Evelyn handed her the key. What's this for? Nina asked. Peace of mind, Nina turned the key over in her palm. You changed the locks. Evelyn nodded. The house is protected now. From who? Anyone who forgot how to knock. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Unmarked envelope, no return address. Slid between a coupon mailer and the electric bill. Evelyn sliced it open with a paring knife. Inside, a glossy trifold brochure for Wisteria Pines Senior Living and Memory Care, featuring a stock photo of an elderly woman smiling beside a bowl of grapes. Paper clipped to it was a typed appointment confirmation. Tour date, Friday 10:06 a.m. Visitor, Evelyn Markham. Status, respite stay evaluation. She read it twice, then folded it in half and placed it beside her tea, like it was part of the morning menu. That afternoon, Janine let herself in through the side door, her arms full of spreadsheets and a half-eaten bag of almonds. You're not going to believe this, she said, tossing the almonds on the counter. Greg posted some article on LinkedIn about elder care tax loopholes. Called it strategic compassion. Evelyn slid the brochure across the table. Janine stopped mid-sentence. "They booked you," she said, her voice flat. Evelyn nodded. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Janine picked up the paper, scanned it, then lowered it like something toxic. "They're moving faster now. They're also skipping steps." Janine leaned forward. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No," Evelyn said, "but I will go. I want them on record for this one." The next morning, Evelyn dressed with precision. Pale blue blouse, pressed slacks, soft gold earrings Nina had given her last Christmas. She brought a small notebook, her ID, and a signed copy of her cognitive exam report. Wisteria Pines was tucked behind a row of gated condos, its entrance flanked by pastel flowers and a sign that read, "Welcome Home." Inside, a woman in scrubs greeted her with a clipboard and a too-wide smile. "Evelyn Markham, we've been expecting you." Evelyn took the clipboard, read the intake form, and signed only one section. "Refusal of evaluation." The staffer blinked. "Oh, you don't want to tour the facility? I've seen enough already. But your daughter is not my proxy." Evelyn stood, handed the form back, and left through the front door without waiting for a reply. That evening, Nina came by, still in her scrubs from clinicals. She was peeling a tangerine at the counter when Evelyn laid the brochure down beside her. "They scheduled a placement meeting for me," Evelyn said. Nina looked up. "They what?" "Without asking. Without telling me." Nina's hand stilled. "They didn't even talk to you first?" Evelyn shook her head. "Not even a warning?" "No. Just assumed they could fold me up like linen and store me somewhere convenient." Nina looked like she didn't know whether to cry or throw something. "I'm calling them." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "Victor will." And he did. By noon the next day, a legal warning was sent directly to Cassie and Greg. Any attempts to pursue unauthorized placement or representation of Evelyn Markham will result in civil action. Cease immediately. Janine arrived with a hard copy of the letter and a file folder labeled Predatory Behavior Log. She sat at Evelyn's dining table and began taping the brochure onto a fresh page. "We're going to make this impossible," she said. Evelyn stood at the sink, washing dishes slowly, methodically. The soapy water didn't bother her hands the way it used to. "They see me as a disruption," she said. Janine dried a dish. "You are." Evelyn didn't smile. "Good." That night, Evelyn added a single line to her journal. "They want to contain me. I'll make that their last move." It started with a line of text Evelyn nearly missed. Printed near the bottom of her monthly statement from Southern Atlantic Bank was a quiet little notification in soft gray ink. Unrecognized login attempt, 2:14 a.m., Chatham County. It was almost apologetic in tone, tucked beneath the interest summary, where most people never look. Evelyn did. She sat at the table a moment longer, her fingertips pressing lightly against the paper. She read it again, slower this time, then looked toward the hallway where her trust binder sat quietly in its protective sleeve beneath the desk. She didn't panic. She simply stood, folded the statement with care, and placed it next to the phone. By early afternoon, Victor was sitting across from her in his usual navy suit, laptop open, with his fingers moving briskly over the keyboard. He had brought Janine with him this time, who carried in a thermal mug, a folder labeled Digital Trail, and the familiar tight expression she wore when numbers stopped adding up. Victor was already speaking as Evelyn poured tea into a pair of mismatched ceramic cups. "There have been multiple attempts," he said, eyes fixed on the screen, all tied to the same IP block, traced back to a residential router in Midtown Savannah, same region as Cassie's address on file. Janine didn't even blink. She was flipping through her binder, already tagging the incident with a colored sticky tab. 3 tries in 8 days, Victor added, all during early morning hours. They were unsuccessful, but the logs are time-stamped, traceable, legally admissible. Evelyn's face remained composed as she gently pushed the sugar bowl toward him. "They're testing the edges, seeing if I'll notice." Janine looked up. "They're looking for cracks." "They won't find any," Evelyn said, "but we'll still log it." Over the next 2 days, Evelyn visited 3 different banks. She closed 2 long-standing accounts, transferred her savings, her certificates of deposit, and the last remaining joint money market fund, one Greg had once advised her to open, into a completely new financial institution under trust ownership. It required notarized identification and trustee signatures for any movement above $500. The accounts now lived inside a legal shell. Greg and Cassie would never legally penetrate, unless they had the stomach for a lawsuit, and the funds to survive it. Victor filed a cease and desist letter to their home address via certified mail. It was printed on formal letterhead with precise legalese that left no ambiguity. Any future attempts to access or manipulate financial information under the Evelyn Markham Irrevocable Trust will be pursued as criminal acts under both Georgia and federal statutes. You are not a party to the trust. Cease immediately. A backup copy was inserted into the binder. Janine, who had returned to Evelyn's kitchen armed with her own folders and color-coded markers, added a fresh section divider labeled Financial Tampering, Phase 1. Evelyn took her time with her journal entry that evening. She didn't just record the facts. She recorded the feeling, the tone of the letter, the silence from the other end, the knowledge that her daughter had stopped calling after her last effort to control the narrative had failed. At the top of the page, she titled it simply, Passive Theft. She wrote about the early morning login attempts. She wrote about the restructured accounts. She wrote about the act of silence itself, how dangerous it could be in the hands of people who knew just enough to be destructive. Later that week, Nina arrived after her clinical shift, a little tired, her ponytail loosened, her ID badge still clipped to her collar. She dropped a bag of groceries on the counter and unzipped her backpack. "They're still talking," she said quietly, almost apologetically, mostly to each other, but loud enough that people hear. Evelyn stirred the pot on the stove without turning. "What have they said?" "They think you're unraveling, that the trust was a knee-jerk reaction." "Greg told someone at church that you've been acting paranoid. Mom says you're withholding out of spite." Evelyn turned off the burner and faced her granddaughter. "And do you believe any of that?" Nina didn't hesitate. "Not for a second. I just thought you should know." Without another word, Evelyn walked to the desk, opened the binder, and flipped to a fresh divider labeled Disinformation. She removed a printout Nina had handed her, screenshots of texts, snippets of conversations relayed through extended family, and began placing them inside sheet protectors. She didn't annotate them. She didn't need to. Truth didn't require embellishment. It only required preservation. Evelyn had never liked social media. She didn't understand the impulse to narrate your own life in real time, nor the strange satisfaction people seem to get from performance empathy, those shallow affirmations sent in the public comment threads. As if grief and virtue could be tallied with emojis. But after Victor's last visit, she began watching, not posting, not responding, just watching. She created a private account with a nonsense name. No photos, no followers, and quietly added the people she needed to observe. Cassie, Greg, a handful of extended relatives who repeated everything they heard. 1 or 2 former neighbors who still liked every picture Cassie posted, no matter what it was. Evelyn scrolled like an archivist, not a mother. The posts weren't constant, but they accumulated. Photos from brunches, wine glasses clinking, gym selfies with hashtags about self-care. Every so often, Evelyn would catch something that made her hands go still over the mouse. A status update. Taking care of aging parents is the hardest unpaid job no one warns you about. A shared meme. Old people don't want answers. They just want attention. A comment under a cousin's vacation photo. Wish I could relax too, but I've got a mother who thinks I'm her assistant. Evelyn didn't reply. She didn't even flinch. She just took screenshots. Each one was saved with the date and time, printed in full color, and placed into a new folder in the binder marked Digital Hostility. She used clear sheet protectors and slipped in a single index card behind each page with a brief type note. Voluntary disclosure. No context required. Janine came by on a Tuesday afternoon with a portable printer and a sharp pair of scissors. She wore a linen shirt and reading glasses pushed halfway down her nose. Together, they worked in near silence. Janine would read aloud as she snipped along the printer margins. She's spiraling, snip. Don't know how much longer we can keep pretending she's fine. Snip. Every call turns into a guilt trip. It's exhausting. Snip. Evelyn nodded without comment. She added each sheet to the growing binder. Janine used a rubber stamp to mark each one. Logged. When they paused for tea, Evelyn sat by the window, looking out at the garden. The camellias had started to bloom again. Same as they had every fall since she moved into the house 36 years ago. They talk like I'm fading, she said softly, as if I've already gone. Janine didn't look up. That's not an accident. No, Evelyn said. It's groundwork. Victor agreed. He visited the following afternoon, reviewed the binder with his usual meticulous attention, and made detailed notations. Every page went into the legal record under a new category. Behavioral precedent. Intent to undermine. He paused at the meme with the elderly woman frowning under the caption about attention. It had over 30 likes. This one, he said, tapping it twice. Might seem harmless to someone skimming, but legally it tells a story. It tells their story, Evelyn said, and they published it for the world. Later that evening, Evelyn sat at her writing desk with her funeral folder open beside her. The original plan had been simple. Standard service, open to all. Reception at the church hall afterward. But she made changes now, line by line. The guest list was amended. Cassie and Greg's names were removed entirely, not even listed under surviving family. Evelyn requested a private memorial, close to anyone not specified in the trust. No social announcements, no flower donations, no online guestbook. Under final instructions, she added one clean sentence. This service is not for spectacle. It is for dignity. That night, Nina stopped by after a study session, still smelling faintly of highlighters and library dust. She noticed the binder on the table. Open to the folder marked Digital Hostility. Is it getting worse? She asked. Evelyn turned a page and tucked it into its place. It's getting clearer. Nina sat across from her. Do you want to say anything to them? Just once. No, Evelyn said calmly. The trust speaks. The invitation came on a Sunday morning. Dressed up as casual, but carrying a sharp edge beneath the pleasantries. Cassie's voice on the voicemail was light, almost chipper. Hey, Mom. Just thought we'd all grab brunch next weekend at the Blue Heron. Greg's treating. It'd be so nice to see you out again. Just us three. Let me know, okay? Love you? Evelyn didn't call back. She didn't text. She waited a full day, then sent a reply through Victor's office. An official letter on letterhead with one clean line. Evelyn Markham will not be attending. No reason, no explanation. Just the answer they weren't expecting. By the time Janine dropped by for tea on Tuesday afternoon, the story had already started to spread. They're laying bricks, she said, setting down a canvas bag filled with new file folders. Greg made a comment at the bank about you becoming reclusive. Cassie's framing it like you're declining, confused. She's playing the long game now. She's playing the only game she knows, Evelyn replied, pouring hot water over the tea bags. Control through suggestion. Janine nodded. They're trying to set a narrative. You being unstable, detached. Evelyn handed her a cup. Then I'll give them a different story to explain. 2 days later, Evelyn walked into her doctor's office with her binder in hand and a crisp blouse buttoned to the collar. Dr. Lindstrom had been her physician for over 15 years, a man who knew the difference between forgetfulness and strategy. They ran the full cognitive evaluation, spatial recall, word association, timed problem solving. Evelyn completed each task without hesitation, her answers clipped but correct. At the end, Dr. Lindstrom leaned back in his chair and smiled. Honestly, you're sharper than most of my interns, he said. Put it in writing, Evelyn said, with the timestamp. He did. The report was sealed and mailed that afternoon. Not to her home, but directly to Victor Tran's office, where it would become part of the Trust's permanent record. That weekend, Evelyn made biscuits from scratch and spent the morning with Nina on the porch, listening to the faint rustle of the Spanish moss in the breeze. They spoke about nothing urgent: clinical rotations, weather changes, how the peach tree had outdone itself this year. Neither of them mentioned brunch. It was Nina who spotted the post first. She was scrolling through her phone while Evelyn rinsed the mixing bowl in the sink. Here it is, Nina said, holding out the screen. Cassie had posted a filtered photo of the brunch table. Mimosas sparkling, avocado toast styled like it was auditioning for a magazine spread. 3 place settings. Only 2 were occupied. The empty chair had a cloth napkin draped over the back. The caption read, "Brunch with my favorite guy, missing someone." Evelyn dried her hands and took the phone. She didn't react. She simply tilted her head, as if studying a painting. "They're making you the absence," Nina said quietly. "That's fine," Evelyn replied. "Let them build the lie. I've documented the truth." Underneath the post, comments had already started to appear. Mutual friends, distant relatives, even a few of Greg's co-workers chimed in with heart emojis and concern. "Thinking of you guys. Hope everything's okay with your mom, Cass. You're doing your best. It's all we can do." Nina didn't hesitate. She tapped the comment box, typed one clear sentence, and hit post. "You mean Grandma? She was never invited inside." It didn't take long. The likes on Nina's comment began to multiply, slowly at first, then faster. A few people liked both comments, but others, more than Evelyn expected, liked only Nina's. Evelyn handed back the phone. "Screenshot it for me, print and log," Nina nodded. Already on it. The knock came just after 11, soft, polite, and completely unnecessary. Evelyn opened the front door to find Greg standing there, hands tucked into the pockets of his polo slacks. A pair of Ray-Bans clipped to the collar of his shirt. Behind him, the morning sunlight filtered through the moss-laced trees. Golden and deceptive. "I was just in the neighborhood," he said. "Figured I'd check in. How's everything going?" Evelyn didn't invite him in. She stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Greg smiled, unbothered. "Still baking those biscuits?" "I am," she said. "Though I imagine that's not what brought you by." He shifted, hands still buried in his pockets. "Cassie and I have been talking. You know, just thinking ahead. That house must feel a little big, just for you." Evelyn said nothing. He continued, cheerful as ever. "It might be time to think about downsizing. You deserve something simpler. No maintenance, no stairs. Just easy living. We could help with the sale, handle the agent, the paperwork. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "You'd do all that?" "Of course." Greg nodded, flashing the smile he always used when posing for work photos. "Family looks out for family." Evelyn smiled back, just as gracious. "Then you won't mind if I refer you to my attorney." Greg blinked. The smile faltered. "He handles all decisions regarding the house," Evelyn added, stepping backward toward the door. "You can speak to him." Before he could reply, she closed the door gently, leaving him on the porch without a single sound of dismissal. That afternoon, Victor drafted a letter on firm letterhead, crisp, authoritative, and brutally unambiguous. Unauthorized inquiry into trust property. Dear Mr. Gregory Wilburn, please be advised that the property located at 304 Ellington Drive is held in full by the Evelyn Markham Irrevocable Trust. As you are not a trustee, signatory, or designated party of interest, you are neither authorized to discuss nor arrange any matters regarding its disposition. Further attempts to do so will be treated as legal overreach and referred to our firm for immediate action. 2 copies were mailed, one to Greg's office, the other to the Wilburns' home address. Later that evening, Nina texted from her dorm. "Nina, They're calling you vindictive now. Nina. Mom said you're punishing them to make a point. Nina. Greg told Uncle Rob you're going off the deep end. Said your lawyer's putting thoughts in your head. Evelyn read the messages, then set the phone down beside her tea. She looked across the table at Janine, who was busy reorganizing the binder tabs by incident type. Financial tampering, digital hostility, reputation sabotage. The pages were starting to fan out from the weight of so much quiet betrayal. They think I'm vindictive, Evelyn said. Janine didn't look up. Next they'll say you're broke. Evelyn chuckled softly. Let them. They'll say whatever helps them sleep. Evelyn nodded. They should sleep while they still can. Janine reached for her notepad and scribbled something, then tore the paper free and handed it over. Evelyn took it. On it, in Janine's practical block print, were 5 words. They won't even get mugs. The day Nina moved in, it rained. Not a dramatic storm, just a slow, steady hush that made the whole neighborhood feel like it was holding its breath. Evelyn stood by the front window, watching as Nina's hatchback pulled into the driveway. Trunks stuffed with duffel bags and plastic crates. A stack of nursing textbooks was visible through the back glass, held in place by a bungee cord and hope. Evelyn opened the door before Nina could knock. You don't have to carry it all at once, she said gently. Nina smiled. I'm 19. I absolutely do. They got everything inside in 2 trips. A suitcase, 2 laundry baskets, and a stethoscope still in its unopened box. The guest room had already been made up. Fresh linens, flowers from the garden in a thrifted vase. A notebook and pen laid neatly on the nightstand. Evelyn had done it quietly, without announcing anything. The way she always had. No declarations, just readiness. By the end of the week, Nina had found her rhythm. Clinical rotations in the mornings, studying in the afternoons, quiet dinners on the porch at dusk. She never asked Evelyn to explain her decisions. She never questioned the locks, or the letterhead, or the trust binder that remained out on the dining table like an ongoing case file. Instead, she showed up. Every day, fully. On a warm Saturday morning, Evelyn handed her a small gift bag. Inside was a box with her name engraved in fine script across the lid. Nina opened it to find a Littmann stethoscope, navy blue, top of the line. I know they give you one at school, Evelyn said, but that's for practice. This one's for the real world. Nina's fingers closed gently around the tubing, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Then softly, I'll earn this. You already have. That evening, Evelyn checked the answering machine. 3 new messages, all from Cassie. The first was syrupy, full of apologies that never quite attached themselves to actions. Hey, Mom. I know things have been tense. I just think maybe we could sit down, just us, no lawyers, just talk. The second sounded rushed, defensive. I'm trying here. You've iced us out, and it's not fair. Greg's trying too, even if you don't see it. The third was quieter, resigned. If this is what you want, then I hope you're happy. Nina doesn't know the full story. Evelyn didn't flinch. She saved each message to a labeled USB drive and dropped it into a zippered pouch in the binder. Janine had already created a new section, Guilt Strategies. Each message was transcribed, dated, and summarized for tone. They're using the same language they used when Greg emptied the joint account, Janine said. Remorse with no record. Like if they say it with the right tremble in their voice. You'll forget the details. I remember everything, Evelyn said. That's the problem. That week, Victor visited to amend the trust. At Evelyn's request, he added an education clause. Full coverage for Nina's nursing school, housing, licensing fees, continuing education, and relocation assistance, should she wish to practice out of state. It was worded tightly, structured to mature in segments, impossible to redirect. Victor read it aloud when finished. All education-related expenses shall be disbursed at the sole discretion of the trust administrator, and no challenge to this allocation shall be admissible without evidence of fraud. Janine smiled. which none of them will ever be smart enough to allege properly, Victor chuckled. Even if they try, the clause is self-healing. It negates its own challengers. Evelyn reached for her journal and pulled out a sealed envelope she'd been holding onto for weeks. Across the front, she'd written simply, "Final letter." Victor took it. "We'll file it with the rest. Yes, this one is for the judge, or the worms, whichever sees it first." Later that night, Evelyn sat by the window and watched as Nina studied under the soft light of a floor lamp. Her granddaughter's lips moved silently as she reviewed flashcards. A highlighter clicked open, then shut. Evelyn whispered aloud, not to anyone present. "You left me in a car. I left you with silence." Janine, seated beside her, turned slightly. "This will survive you," she said. "And damn them forever." Evelyn didn't reply. She just closed the binder, slowly, deliberately, and left the porch light off that night for good. It took 3 clicks to close the binder, not hurried ones, measured, deliberate, as Evelyn pressed down on each metal ring until it gave that hollow snap of finality. The pages inside barely shifted. They'd been organized with such precision that even air seemed afraid to move them. She slid the plastic latch into place and turned the key on the fireproof safe beside the bookshelf. Click. Then, without looking back, she walked into the kitchen and handed the secondary binder to Janine. "Everything's mirrored," she said, "page for page. If anything happens here, fire, flood, foul play, that one carries forward." Janine didn't blink. She took the weight of it into her arms like it was a living thing. "I'll keep it at my house," she said, "behind the cleaning supplies. No one looks there." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I'm giving it to you." On Tuesday, Victor came by with final paperwork in a weatherproof folder. Everything had been updated. The trust now carried a new name, stamped clearly on the cover. The Wilburn Free Future Trust. Nina caught sight of the label and raised an eyebrow. "Little on the nose, don't you think?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She was signing 3 copies of her updated healthcare directive, each initialed, witnessed, and notarized in Victor's presence. When she finally did speak, her voice was level. "No ambiguity, not anymore. Not about who speaks for me or who doesn't." Nina nodded, sobered by the weight of what that meant. "And if they try again?" Victor looked up from the documents. "They're locked out now. Ironclad, no loopholes, no appeals. The trust, the property, your health care, the final arrangements. Every door is shut." Evelyn folded her hands. "Good. Then they'll hear it from silence, not from me." That evening, she sat with Nina on the porch. The summer air had softened just enough to let in the sound of cicadas from the trees, a slow buzz that felt more like memory than noise. Nina sipped iced tea and flipped a pencil between her fingers, her nursing notes resting untouched in her lap. "Do you ever feel sad?" she asked finally. "About all of it?" Evelyn exhaled. Not in pain, more like a release she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Only that it took this long," she said, "to stop waiting for them to become who they never were." Nina leaned her head on her shoulder, just briefly. "You're not alone anymore. I know." Later that night, Evelyn sat at her writing desk beneath the lamplight and opened the draft of her obituary. The original had been composed by Cassie years earlier, back when she still assumed she'd be the one to deliver the eulogy, to organize the flowers, to claim the credit. Evelyn deleted it line by line. She rewrote it from scratch. It read simply, Evelyn Ruth Markham, aged 79. Passed peacefully in her Savannah home. Former English teacher, volunteer archivist, and gardener of stubborn camellias. She is survived by her beloved granddaughter, Nina, who she called her light. At Evelyn's request, no formal service will be held. In lieu of flowers, please donate to a nursing scholarship fund of your choice. There was no mention of Cassie, no mention of Greg, no surviving daughter, no estranged son-in-law. No hint that they'd ever existed in Evelyn's most sacred version of the truth. When she printed the page, it looked cleaner than she expected. Evelyn placed it into the funeral folder with the others, slid it beneath the laminated guest list, and tucked everything back into its envelope. Before she turned out the light, she removed one last sticky note from her drawer and wrote in small looping cursive, "If you're reading this, then I won." She placed it at the front of the binder, just behind the Wilburn Free Future title sheet. The knock came just after dusk, not forceful at first, just the kind of knock meant to imply civility. The kind meant to remind someone you still expect to be let in. Evelyn stood in the hallway, perfectly still. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just stared at the peephole. Through the warped fisheye lens, she saw Greg on the porch. He was in a dress shirt this time, rolled sleeves, khaki slacks, a practiced expression of concern barely stretching over the sharpness beneath. Behind him stood Cassie, arms folded, wearing oversized sunglasses even though the sun had already dropped behind the trees. Her mouth was a tight line, her posture stiff. Neither of them looked at each other. Greg knocked again, louder. Inside, Nina stood by the front window, camera app open on her phone, thumb hovering over record. Evelyn said nothing. She didn't move from the door. From outside, Greg's voice reached through the wood, pleasant and high-pitched with stress. "Evelyn, we just want to talk. You've made your point. Come on, let's be reasonable." No answer. Cassie took a step forward. "Mom, please, you're hurting this family." The last word cracked in her mouth like a snapped bone. Not broken from impact, just brittle from being hollowed out too long. Evelyn didn't even blink. She waited. Greg looked around the porch like he'd lost something. Maybe his nerve, maybe the script. His hand hovered near the mailbox, then dropped. Cassie turned to him and hissed something just out of range. Her face was flushing red. Nina zoomed in on the angle, capturing the tension in Cassie's jaw, the rigid square of Greg's shoulders. Then Evelyn did the only thing she needed to. She reached up and turned off the porch light. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, dense, loaded, final. The kind of silence that couldn't be undone with flowers or voicemails. The kind that rewrote the story from outside the house entirely. From the window, Nina lowered the phone and whispered, "Was that enough?" Evelyn stepped back from the door, slow and steady, her breath even. Almost. They both sat down on the couch without turning on any more lights. No one spoke. The distant sound of tires crunching gravel told them the Wilburns had left. The air inside the house was cool, clean, undisturbed. Outside, humidity pressed against the windows, like something desperate trying to get back in. An hour later, the delivery came. The courier was neutral, unknowing. A college kid in a polo with a clipboard and a neutral smile. He rang the bell once, placed the flat parcel on the welcome mat, took a photo for proof of drop-off, and walked back to his car without a word. Nina opened the door. On the ground sat a thick, embossed envelope, heavy with official weight. Victor's seal. Evelyn picked it up, brought it inside, and laid it flat across the kitchen table. Her hands didn't shake, not even a little. She sliced it open with the precision of a letter never meant to be read by its recipients. Inside were 3 printed copies, 2 originals and a file duplicate. The letterhead was crisp, the language sharper than any blade. Notice of permanent legal and testamentary exclusion. To Cassandra Wilburn and Gregory Wilburn. Effective immediately and in perpetuity, you are formally and irrevocably excluded from all designations, distributions, recognitions, and benefits associated with the Evelyn Ruth Markham Irrevocable Trust. This exclusion extends to all physical, digital, financial, and ceremonial components of Ms. Markham's estate. Any inquiry, contestation, or contact will be regarded as harassment and referred to counsel. Evelyn signed all 3 copies in blue ink. Nina folded and sealed the duplicates for delivery. She stamped them, initialed the corners for verification, and slid them into a padded envelope addressed by hand. As she affixed the label, she looked up. "Where do you want me to drop it?" Evelyn stared out the window. "Wherever it's most inconvenient." They both smiled, quietly, no celebration, just certainty. Evelyn didn't like posting. She never had. Even when Cassie used to tell her it was just how people communicate now, Evelyn had resisted the idea that truth needed an audience to matter. But that morning she made an exception. She sat at her desk, the soft rustle of the garden filtering in through the open window, and scanned the PDF one final time. It was the most recent cognitive assessment, signed by Dr. Lindstrom, sealed, time-stamped, and clear. No impairments, no signs of decline, mental acuity consistent with baseline. She uploaded the file, no caption, no hashtags. Just the document, centered and alone, like a verdict rendered quietly but irrevocably. Within minutes, the notification bubbles began to appear. Small pulsing signals of friction. Views. Shares. One private message from a neighbor. "Did you mean to post this?" Evelyn didn't answer, but Nina did. She reposted the image with a single sentence in bold. "You don't get to rewrite her." That was the moment it all started to unravel. Cassie's curated myth of an aging, confused woman retreating into silence met its first public fracture. Friends who had blindly echoed her worry fell quiet. Greg's half-lies began to sound defensive. Extended family members who'd remained neutral started liking Nina's post. Screenshots began to circulate. So did questions. Janine was ready. She arrived that afternoon with a legal pad, 3 color-coded binders, and a printed spreadsheet of every digital breadcrumb Cassie had left behind over the last 3 months. "She's in violation," Janine said, sliding the papers across the table. HIPAA adjacent at minimum. Emotional defamation at worst. She's been implying dementia to over 400 followers. That's grounds for an ethics complaint, if not a slander case. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Will it stick?" "If it doesn't," Janine said, "it will still stain." Victor called half an hour later. His voice, though calm, carried a tighter edge than usual. "We're filing a protective status with the State Adult Services Division. Preemptive," he said, "in case they try to spin this as you being a danger to yourself." Evelyn's laugh was dry, almost amused. "Dangerous how? Reading too fast? Folding towels wrong?" "Doesn't matter," Victor said. "We close the loophole before they crawl through it." After he hung up, Evelyn wandered out to the garden. The camellias had faded, but the jasmine vines were in bloom, climbing the back fence like they were reaching for breath. The air was thick with sweetness, not suffocating, just enough to remind her she was still alive in the place she chose to be. She opened her journal. In the middle of a fresh page, she wrote in deliberate, elegant cursive, "I am not hungry anymore. Not for affection, not for apologies, not for the ache of being misunderstood and still hoping to be seen." She closed the journal, stood slowly, and walked back toward the house. Inside, Nina was peeling peaches at the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled up, a worn cookbook propped open beside her. She worked quietly, confidently, like she'd made cobbler 100 times. Evelyn didn't interrupt, just watched as her granddaughter placed the sliced fruit in a wide ceramic dish, sprinkled brown sugar with a measured hand, and mixed the topping with a fork instead of a mixer. The oven ticked softly as it preheated. The smell of cinnamon and fruit began to fill the corners of the house. An hour later, they sat on the porch, each with a warm bowl in hand, the cicadas humming lazily beyond the hedges. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, Nina said, "You're not scared, are you?" "No," Evelyn replied. "Just finished." Nina looked over. "Is that the same thing?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "In this case, yes." It was early, still quiet, when Evelyn wrote the sentence that had lived at the back of her mind for years. In her journal, on a page she had saved without knowing why, she picked up her fountain pen and wrote in clean, unbroken cursive, "You knew what you did. You just didn't think I'd respond." The ink dried slowly. She didn't blot it. Let it settle. Outside, the garden was waking up. The jasmine still held last night's perfume, and the morning light had a gold edge that made the porch look like a photograph from another life. But Evelyn wasn't lingering in memory anymore. She had business to finish. By noon, Victor had arrived with a briefcase and a quiet smile. No tea today, just documents. He opened the folder, withdrew a certificate marked with the courthouse seal, and laid it flat on the kitchen table. The final trust certification, irrevocable, recorded, archived in both digital and hard copy form. Witnessed, notarized, confirmed. "The house is now Nina's," he said. "Effective immediately. Transferred via living trust clause, contest proof, debt proof, parent proof." Evelyn nodded once. "And if they ask questions?" "They'll be referred to the record," Victor said, "which is permanent." He slid the folder across the table. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She signed where he pointed, each signature smooth and steady. When it was done, she closed the pen, capped it, and set it precisely beside her teacup. A small framed photo sat on the corner of the sideboard now, not a portrait, but a scanned copy of a restaurant receipt. Just above the subtotal was the table number. Below that, 3 lines of names: Greg, entree; grilled trout; Cassie, entree; risotto primavera. Entree, none listed. She had found it months ago in a crumpled folder from her glove box. The line where her name should have been was blank. The server had split the check without realizing she never stepped inside. She had waited in the car. No seat, no drink, no bread. Just the heat and the hum of the air conditioner, and the sound of her own silence, deliberate, practiced, endured. Now it was framed. Museum glass, hung just inside the office door, a memory not of pain, but of proof. That afternoon, Evelyn brewed fresh tea and opened the front windows to let the breeze in. The sealed binder sat on her desk. Its latch clicked, its corners square. Next to it was a small clay saucer holding 2 peach pits from the cobbler Nina had made the night before. She liked the symbolism. Fruit eaten, core saved. Nina came in quietly, holding a padded envelope addressed in Victor's handwriting. "Final deed copy," she said. "Filed and confirmed." Evelyn motioned toward the desk. "Put it with the binder." Nina did, then turned back and sat across from her. "You didn't just protect your future," she said. "You protected mine." Evelyn looked at her, soft but unyielding. That was the point. They sat in silence for a while, not the tense kind, not the kind that came from waiting. This silence was full, satisfied, like a song that had ended on the right note. At dusk, Evelyn lit a single candle on the porch and opened her journal again. She thought about all the lines she'd written over the past months, some sharp, some aching, some steady as a courtroom stenographer's record. Then, on the very last page, she wrote one final sentence. "My daughter and her husband made me wait in the parking lot while they ate in a restaurant, so I starved their future out of my will." She didn't underline it. She didn't need to.